My name is Aisha. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the courtroom was the silence. Not the quiet kind, the heavy kind. The kind that presses against your chest and reminds you that everyone in the room has already decided who you are. I felt it in the way people looked at me. Some with curiosity, some with pity, some like they were watching a story they already knew the ending to. My father sat across the room, perfectly composed. His suit was sharp, his posture confident. He looked like a man who had nothing to lose. And for a long time, he was right. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I followed, my hands trembling just enough to notice. The case was called. My father rose immediately. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm and controlled. "I'm here because my daughter is not capable of making rational decisions." He didn't look at me. Not once. "She has a history of emotional instability," he continued. "She imagines threats that don't exist. She refuses guidance. And recently, she's been making dangerous choices regarding her property and finances." Dangerous. That word echoed in my head. I wanted to speak. I wanted to scream that he was lying. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, just like he always expected me to. The judge listened carefully, his face unreadable. No interruptions. No raised eyebrows. My father took that silence as approval. "She needs protection," he said. "And I'm the only one who can provide it." Protection. That was his favorite word. When it was finally my turn, the judge looked at me. "Miss Aisha," he said evenly, "do you wish to respond?" Every eye turned toward me. My throat tightened. "Yes, Your Honor," I said softly. "But I'd like the court to review the full medical file first." My father's head snapped up. For the first time that morning, he looked unsure. The judge nodded. "Bring the file." A clerk placed a thick folder on the bench. The sound it made when it landed felt louder than it should have. The judge opened it slowly. Too slowly. He flipped through the pages in silence. My father shifted in his seat. Then the judge stopped. He looked up. "Mister," he said, addressing my father. "Do you recognize this evaluation?" My father smiled. "Yes, Your Honor. That confirms her condition." The judge tilted his head slightly. "Interesting," he said. "Because according to this document, the evaluation was ordered by you." My father's smile stiffened. And the judge continued, turning another page. "It was requested 3 days after your daughter refused to transfer ownership of her property to you." The room froze. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. The judge didn't stop. "There's also a second report here," he said, holding up another document. "One completed by a different specialist." He paused. "This report states your daughter shows no signs of instability." Whispers spread through the courtroom. My father finally looked at me. Not with anger. Not with disappointment. With fear. The judge closed the file. "You presented this court with half a story," he said calmly, "and hoped silence would cover the rest." He leaned forward. "You didn't come here to protect your daughter." The room felt like it stopped breathing. "You came here to control her." The words landed like a verdict of their own. After a brief recess, the judge returned. "Guardianship request denied," he said. "Case dismissed. And due to the inconsistencies presented today, a formal investigation is ordered." My father sat motionless. I stood up on legs that barely felt like mine. As I walked out of the courtroom, I could feel people watching me differently now. Not with pity. With understanding. I didn't look back. Because for the first time in my life, the truth had spoken for me. And it was loud enough. I thought the courtroom victory would bring peace. I thought the world would settle back into some kind of normal. I was wrong. 2 days after the case was dismissed, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Miss Aisha," a calm, neutral voice said. "I'm calling from the court records office. Your father's case is now under further review due to irregularities in the submitted documents." I felt my stomach drop. Irregularities? I thought the fight was over. The voice continued. "Please be available for any follow-up. This may take time." I hung up, hands trembling. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next week, the investigation hearing was scheduled. I walked into the same courtroom I thought I had left behind. It looked smaller somehow. The atmosphere heavier. My father sat in the front row, visibly tense this time. The calm, confident man I had seen just days ago was gone. Now, he shifted in his seat, fidgeted with his tie, avoided eye contact with anyone. I sat silently in the back, listening to the murmurs of people who had returned to watch the drama unfold. Some recognized me. Some whispered about the strong daughter who beat her father in court. The judge entered, and I felt the familiar pressure in my chest. He didn't waste time. No greetings. No preamble. Case number 147B, follow-up investigation, he said, his voice sharp. Mister, please explain the origin of these signatures and medical reports. My father's attorney started to speak, but the judge cut him off. We need clarity, not excuses. For the first time, I felt my father hesitate. He fumbled through papers. He shuffled files. The calm precision of his earlier courtroom performance was gone. He finally said.
The judge leaned forward and addressed him
shaky.
directly.
They are.
Sir,
The
are
judge
these signatures
interrupted.
authentic?
Interesting.
Are these reports
Because
accurate
independent
representations of your
verification
daughter's
shows
condition?
these signatures do
My
not
father
match
paused.
official records.
The courtroom
and the
was
second
silent.
medical evaluation
Even the
contradicts
spectators
the
seemed
claims
to
you
hold
made.
their breath.
A wave of gasps went through the audience. Even the attorneys exchanged glances. I kept my eyes on my father. His face had gone pale. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, realizing there was no defense. The judge continued. You manipulated medical records and documents to present a false narrative. This court does not take such behavior lightly. I sat quietly, watching him shrink in real time. The man who once towered over me with control and authority was suddenly diminished in front of everyone. Evidence after evidence was presented. Witnesses who had been silent before were now giving statements. Former staff from my father's office detailed attempts to coerce me into signing over property. Medical professionals confirmed that the initial evaluations had been influenced under duress. I tried not to smile. Not out of cruelty, but out of relief. The judge paused and looked at me. My daughter, he asked gently, his eyes on me. Do you wish to say anything? I took a deep breath. Yes, Your Honor, I said. For years, I was silenced, manipulated, and made to feel I was powerless. But the truth cannot be hidden forever. The judge nodded. Very well. Please proceed with your statement. I told the court everything. The hidden threats. The manipulations. The way my father tried to control not only my property but my life. Every detail mattered. My father sat frozen. The audience leaned in with every word I spoke. I could see the disbelief in their eyes, not at me, but at him. When I finished, the judge remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke, calm but firm. Based on the evidence presented today, it is clear that Mr. attempted to manipulate the court and his daughter through
coercion.
false documentation. The court finds sufficient grounds to pursue criminal investigation for forgery and abuse of authority. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I stayed seated, feeling the weight of victory settling around me. The judge added one final remark. Miss Aisha, it is apparent that you have shown strength and composure far beyond your years. This court acknowledges your courage. My father tried to speak. He started. But the words caught in his throat. He looked at me, and I looked back. No anger. No tears. Just the recognition that the power dynamics had shifted forever. The hearing ended, but the investigation continued. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about reclaiming control over my own life. Walking out of the courtroom that day, I felt the first real sense of freedom. Not complete freedom. The investigation meant my father's misdeeds were still unfolding. But freedom in knowing that I could finally speak, be heard, and stand for myself. People approached me afterward, offering support. Some whispered congratulations. Some just stared, incredulous at the transformation in my father. I didn't answer anyone. I just walked toward the door, breathing in the crisp air outside. For the first time in years, I felt the truth lifting a weight off my shoulders. And I knew this was only the beginning. Because the real story wasn't over yet. The investigation would uncover more. And I was ready for whatever came next. The morning of the final hearing felt different. The air was thick with tension, but it wasn't just fear, it was anticipation. Every step I took toward the courthouse felt heavier than usual, as if the building itself remembered the battles fought inside. My father sat in the front row, a shell of the man I had known. His posture stiff, his eyes downcast, and for the first time, he didn't radiate confidence. The courtroom murmurs followed him like shadows, whispers of disbelief spreading among spectators and lawyers alike. I took my seat in the back, letting the whispers roll over me like waves I had learned to navigate. This was my world now. I had faced the lies, the manipulation, the fear. And I had survived. The judge entered, his presence commanding the room into immediate silence. No words were wasted. The clerk read the case number aloud, and the final hearing began. "Mr." the judge said, looking directly at my father. "The court has reviewed all prior documentation, testimonies, and reports. We are here to finalize the findings regarding your actions toward your daughter and the alleged manipulation of legal and medical records." My father swallowed. He tried to adjust his tie but didn't meet anyone's eyes. The prosecution began to present the compiled evidence. The first manipulated medical report, now confirmed as falsified. Correspondence showing attempts to coerce me into signing over property. Witness statements from staff who had been threatened or silenced before. The second independent evaluation confirming my mental stability. Each piece was laid out meticulously, methodically. I watched my father's face pale with each revelation. It was surreal. The same man who had once stood over me like a giant now shrunk into a figure of helplessness. When the prosecution finished, the judge paused, letting the weight of the evidence sink in. Miss Aisha, the courtroom held its collective breath. Clarity and courage the judge began slowly. This court recognizes your resilience to them and the unjust circumstances you endured. I didn't look at my father as I sat down. I didn't need to. When the session ended, the spectators rose and murmured among themselves. Some approached me quietly, offering words of support. I simply nodded, my mind elsewhere. Outside, the sunlight felt different. Sharper. Clearer. For years, I had been trapped by fear and manipulation. Today, I walked away with the certainty that the balance had shifted. My father exited shortly after, trying to regain dignity that was no longer his to claim. He glanced at me briefly, a look of defeat, maybe remorse, or maybe realization that power had finally left his hands. For the first time, I felt truly free. Not just because the court had ruled in my favor, but because I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, and my life. Walking down the courthouse steps, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Years of lies, threats, and control were being dismantled, piece by piece. And I knew that while this chapter was ending, the next was mine to write. I would not be silent. I would not be controlled. I would live on my own terms. Because some victories are measured not in money or documents, but in reclaiming your own existence. And today, I had finally won. I thought the courtroom battle was over. I thought the verdict had closed the chapter of lies and manipulation. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the final hearing, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Just one typed line. "You don't know the whole story." My hands shook as I held it. Inside was a small USB drive, unmarked. I didn't know what to expect, fear, maybe, or some hidden truth I wasn't ready to see. That night, I sat in my apartment, the drive plugged into my laptop, and pressed play. The first videos were old home recordings. Family moments, birthdays, dinners. But then the camera caught my mother's voice. She was crying softly, but with urgency. "Aisha, if you see this, you must know the truth. Your father, he is not what he appears to be. Protect yourself. Protect your life. If he finds out you know, he will try to silence you." My chest tightened. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The next clip began, and this time it was my father's voice. Cold. Controlled. Calculated. "She must stay weak," he said. "If she becomes strong, everything I built could collapse." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just about property or legal control. This had been years in the making: manipulation, coercion, silencing, and fear. I realized in that moment that my mother had been trying to protect me all along. Her mental instability, the very thing my father used against me, had been a fabrication to shield me from his schemes. I watched, horrified, as more clips revealed the truth. My mother had hidden financial documents to prevent my father from taking everything. She had tried to file complaints, but my father's influence had buried them. He had manipulated medical professionals and legal advisors to paint her as unstable. Every attempt she made to defend herself or me was blocked. The reality hit me hard. For years, I had believed my mother was fragile, broken, unable to protect me. In truth, she had been strong, brave, and silenced. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed the videos, the recordings, the evidence. Every lie my father had told now appeared in stark contrast to the truth. The next morning, I went straight to the hospital where my mother's records were kept. The same hospital my father had used to validate false claims about me. I met with the chief doctor, who looked at me with cautious sympathy. "Your mother wasn't unstable," he said quietly. "She was forced to act as if she was, for her own safety and yours." I felt anger rise like a storm inside me. All those years, I had internalized fear, doubt, and guilt. And all the while, the person who truly tried to protect me had been dismissed as weak. I knew I had to act. I couldn't let this continue, not for me, not for my mother, not for anyone else who might be trapped by his manipulation. I started documenting everything. The USB videos, the hospital records, witness statements, anything that proved the truth about my father's schemes. Every detail mattered. Every moment was evidence. Weeks later, I called a press conference. Cameras flashed. Microphones captured every word. "I am Aisha," I said, standing tall. "And for years, I have been silenced, manipulated, and threatened. But today, I will speak the truth, not only for myself but for my mother and for anyone who has been forced into silence." I detailed the manipulations, the false medical claims, the forged documents, and the threats. I showed the videos. I shared the hospital evidence. I revealed everything. The world reacted immediately. News outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded. People called it shocking. People called it inspiring. And my father? He disappeared from public view. Lawyers, investigators, and authorities closed in. The man who had once seemed untouchable had finally been exposed. For the first time, I felt empowered. Not because of the courtroom, not because of the law, but because I had spoken the truth, the whole truth. And I realized something profound. The fight wasn't just for justice. It was for freedom. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from fear. Freedom to live and speak without control. That day, I also realized the battle had only just begun. There were still shadows to uncover, secrets my father thought would remain buried, and truths that needed to be told. But for the first time in my life, I felt ready. I had the courage. I had the voice. And I had the power to change everything. Because the truth, once spoken, is unstoppable. And I was no longer afraid to speak it. The moment I saw the press coverage, my stomach twisted. Videos from the conference were trending. Headlines screamed, "Daughter exposes father's decades of manipulation, mother silenced for years." I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and dread. Relief because the truth was finally out. Dread because my father was still out there, and I knew he wouldn't go down without trying something desperate. That evening, I sat with my mother. For the first time in years, I could speak to her freely. The woman I thought had been weak and distant was radiant with resilience. "My Aisha," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "I tried to shield you. I tried to fight quietly, but he was everywhere, controlling everything. I thought silence would keep you safe, but it didn't. I was wrong." I shook my head, holding her hands. "Mom, you were never wrong. You were protecting me. You were brave." She smiled faintly, but the tension in her eyes remained. "Brave isn't enough when the world is against you," she whispered. I realized then how deep the rabbit hole went. The manipulation, the lies, the control, it wasn't just about property or documents. It was about power, about fear, about absolute domination. And my father had practiced it for decades. I spent the next few days diving into everything my mother had hidden. Files, letters, recordings, and photographs, evidence my father never knew existed. Every piece painted a picture of courage, strategy, and foresight. My mother had anticipated his moves. She had prepared for the moment he would expose her, the moment he would try to control me. She had been fighting silently all along. I realized how much I had underestimated her strength. The woman I had thought fragile was the real architect of our survival. I also understood why my father had grown reckless during the court hearings. He had assumed he had total control. But he had never counted on my mother's hidden resistance, or my eventual awakening. Then came the escalation. Within a week of the press conference, law enforcement contacted me. My father had attempted to destroy evidence, move assets, and intimidate witnesses. Criminal charges were officially filed: forgery, coercion, and attempted fraud. Investigators had enough proof to begin pursuing him aggressively. He had miscalculated. He had assumed fear would keep me quiet. He had assumed my mother's silence would remain unbroken. But he had underestimated both of us. The first confrontation happened when the investigators visited him. He had tried to deny everything, but the mounting evidence left him speechless. For the first time, the man who had always held power over me, over my mother, over our lives, had no control. Meanwhile, I continued gathering testimonies from former employees, neighbors, and family friends. Each story revealed a pattern of manipulation and intimidation, creating a web of deceit that had entangled anyone close to us. And through it all, I felt something powerful: validation. I was not crazy. I was not weak. I was not alone. Every piece of evidence, every recorded video, every witness statement was a step toward justice, but also toward reclaiming our lives. One evening, my mother and I sat together reviewing files. She pointed to a folder, her hand trembling slightly. "This," she said, "is the moment that would have broken most people. But you, Aisha, you faced it and survived. You are stronger than I ever imagined." I looked at her and realized something profound. The courage she had shown by staying silent to protect me, combined with the courage I had shown by speaking out, created a force neither my father nor anyone else could stop. The next weeks were intense. Investigators moved quickly. Press coverage was relentless. And through it all, my father became increasingly isolated, desperate, and finally powerless. It was surreal to watch the man who had once seemed invincible crumble under the weight of truth. He had built his empire of fear, but fear can only protect lies for so long. And in the middle of it all, I'd realized the most important truth. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite it. By speaking out, by facing the lies, and by honoring my mother's hidden strength, I had reclaimed not only my life, but our family's dignity. That night, I called my mother. "Mom," I whispered, "we did it. We finally did it." She laughed softly through tears. "Yes, Aisha. And this is only the beginning. The world will know the real truth now, and no one can ever take that away from us." And I knew she was right. Because truth, once exposed, becomes unstoppable. And justice, when combined with courage, becomes inevitable. For the first time in my life, I slept without fear. Because tomorrow, no matter what happened, we were ready. We had the truth. We had each other. And we had the strength to face whatever came next.